Stuck finding my way, there's no other way.
I got you.
You live and you learn, I'm just writing my
You said you used to show niggas how to keep the shit real. Chapter and verse.
So I'm gonna put me first. Just mark my words. A whole chapter and verse. Write it up, write it up, write it up. Chapter, write it up, write it up.
Give him another round of applause, please.
Thank you so much. Thank you.
Mr. Jamal Joseph, that was a powerful piece you just showed there. We're going to get into the meat of the story of this film. But, you know, we had the pleasure of having a conversation with each other a few minutes ago, okay? And you hear about the art imitating life and life imitating art, right? And one word that you used was artivism, okay? And, you know, many times over the years, we've seen art movies, you know, sometimes they were fictitious and could be violent in nature, could be exaggerated, but now these days with everything that's going on, there's really a fine line between what's real and, you know, what's fictitious. You know, something like this powerful movie right here, everything you see in that movie, a lot of it's going on right now, you know. So just talk about, you know, your definition of the word artivism and, you know, give us a little bit of your background and how you came to be a filmmaker.
Well, an artivist is someone who is an artist and an activist and doesn't see a separation between the two. And this kind of storytelling, I think, is rooted in the spirit of the African griot, G-R-I-O-T. The T is silent. And the griot would sit in the middle of the village underneath the tree, the big baobab tree, and he or she needed to be entertaining. They needed to be able to play the djembe, dance, tell stories, do poetry, and entertain the tribe, but they also needed to be able to communicate the history of the tribe, the current events, and also charge. Those stories led to a charge, something that people had to do with this information and with this entertainment. And that's the type of storytelling that I wanted to do. I grew up in Harlem, between Harlem and the Bronx. When Dr. King was killed, I was raised by adoptive grandparents. Never knew my real dad, and my adoptive grandfather passed away when I was 13 years old. So although I was a great student, I was hanging out on the street corners looking for that path to manhood.
Sure. At
15, I joined the Black Panther Party. And when I was 16, I was arrested as part of a case known as the Panther 21 case. Sister Afeni Shakur was part of that case. And as a result of my involvement, the Panther 21 was eventually acquitted. I came out, I was one of the youngest national spokesmen and a leader of the New York chapter, but I spent a total of 9.5 years in prison. When I left prison, and this has been 30 years, the United States of America was number 3 in the world in terms of the number of people that it had incarcerated, with about 500,000 people, which is a staggering number. But brothers and sisters, today that number is 2.5, approaching 2.5 million. We're number 1 in the world. Then we were behind the Soviet Union and South Africa, then Soviet Union. And there's a school-to-prison pipeline. There are corporations that check the 3rd grade reading scores of black boys to determine not how many schools to build, but how many prisons to build. And so in Harlem, where I live, there's a staggering reality that 1 in 3 black men have been to prison or headed to prison. Daniel also lives in Harlem. He's an Ohio native. Daniel went to Yale University. I'm a professor at Columbia University, and we're sitting there, quote unquote, 2 Ivy Leaguers that both had the prison experience wrapped around us in our own family. And to us, that's not just 1 in 3. That means that's brothers, fathers, sons, grandsons. And so we set out as artivists to tell a story that humanized and put a real kind of human face and spirit and emotion on this problem of modern day slavery in our community.
Yeah, you talk about the, absolutely. You talk about the school to prison pipeline. You know, all we needed was about 30 seconds to just have a conversation, you know, and there's something called cultural identification. okay? And within that cultural identification, you know, you and I can go to Harlem, to LA, to St. Louis, and we're here in Pittsburgh right now. But your film, you know, takes place in Harlem. But again, as far as the cultural identification is concerned, this could be a Pittsburgh, a St. Louis, a Ferguson. You know, talk about how you were able to tell. You told a lot of stories in that movie. I mean, there were so many different storylines here. You know, talk about how you were able to, you know, get all of them into one piece and how you wanted this to, you know, pretty much show that, you know, this story can happen anywhere, especially in the United States of America.
Well, the thing about good storytelling is that the more specific you are and the more truthful you are, the more universal the story becomes. Sure. And it's why we can see, you know, certain foreign films and identify, and it's also why our culture and our music resonates around the world. And so we wanted to just do an honest portrayal of those characters. We wanted to show that love between men, you know, between brothers. We wanted to show that mentorship. We wanted to show the kind of grandmothers that we know. You know, Loretta Devine, didn't she do a magnificent job?
She was fantastic.
Loretta
she was
killed
fantastic.
It. But those are the grandmothers we know. Feisty, young, they've lived life, they understand, they know more about the streets than we know. They know about church. That's where the term chapter and verse comes from when, you know, we have grandmas and, you know, people say, grandma knows that Bible chapter and verse. But it's also saying on the streets that you know the streets chapter and verse. And we thought that if we just put an honest lens on what black family and extended family was, that it would touch a lot of folks. And we've been gratified. Brother, just as you said, wherever we've shown the film, you know, L.A., Chicago, Atlanta, people have stood up in tears at the end saying, that's me, that's my brother, that's my sister, that's my story.
Yeah, you see yourself in that piece, absolutely. You know, let's get right into some of the actors. You know, you talked about Loretta Devine, you know, Omari Hardwick, you know, and a cast of you know, heavy hitters. You know, what was it like working with them and, you know, just being on the set? And I'm sure there was some realism that happened off camera as well.
Well, first of all, and Selena Slaver, you might recognize her. She was the supervisor from Orange is the New Black. Yeah, right? Selena's right. She, you know, the interesting thing about it, we weren't a really big budget film. We weren't a micro-budget film, but it's almost like we had just enough money to get in trouble. Do you know what I mean?
Of course.
It was a $1.2 million budgeted film. By the way, I want to say it's the company that produced it, my partner and I, Cheryl Hill. Of that $1.2 million, we were able to leave about 75–80% in the community.
Oh, that's fantastic. That's fantastic.
And we had the most diverse crew shooting in New York that summer. You know, we had, you know, our whole producing unit, with the exception of 2 people, were all women. Our directing unit, and that means myself, the assistant directors, all of the PAs were black men. You have to understand what this means in the midst of summer in Harlem to have black men standing on the corner with walkie-talkies, and they're not cops. And then for black boys to come up and go, what are you doing here? And for those men to say, we're making a movie, come closer. You know, come meet the director, come meet the stars. And Omari, as we were talking about, when he wasn't filming, and you know, a lot of fans, as you can imagine, when they're coming around, they recognized him from Power. He wouldn't like get in the car and go to the holding area to the hotel. He stayed out there with the kids, talking with them, running in and out of open hydrants, playing basketball. And the scene that you saw when the police were coming, remember that mini riot scene?
Oh, yeah.
As we were filming the scene where the 2 of them were talking about the old days, that really happened. The cops got into an altercation with some real gang members, the real YGs 2 blocks away. Our crew kind of ran down there and started filming. Omari came with us, Daniel came with us, and that brother that he's consoling was really about to do something stupid, and he put his arms around him and started consoling that brother. So this was, you know, back to what you're saying, art imitating life in that instant. The rally scene, the day before we were about to film that scene, Mike Brown got killed. And so the scene was originally scripted to be pull-ups for justice, right? And that's a real crew of brothers that work out in Harlem. There's a lot of scaffolding around these parks. Some of them have been to prison, as the guy said. Some of them are coming off jobs. And they've been doing that stuff. We had the theme of bars throughout the movie and the idea, what can we do to pull ourselves up? And our art department stayed up the whole night. We talked about it the whole night, and we says, no, let's make this what it's about. Let's talk about Mike Brown. Let's talk about Trayvon. Let's talk about 6-year-old Janisha Scott that's handcuffed, you know. And if you Google that incident, little Janisha came to school with her uniform pressed, and her shirt was sparkling, and her hair was braided. In other words, her mother did not send her to school expecting her to be in handcuffs. This is a mama that fed, bathed, and took care of her child. So we were outraged by all of that. And as we were marching down the street, community folk joined in. We said, we're filming a movie. They said, I don't care, let's protest. So we were able to capture a lot of that in the moment energy in the film.
That's absolutely, no, that's great. We're going to take some questions off from the audience, so please, there are 2 microphones right here. You know, just feel free to come on down. I'm going to ask a question, and hopefully someone will be at the mics. You know, talk about the importance of, you know, making sure that you show these types of films and the importance of the Black Bottom Film Festival and film festivals like this all around the world to, you know, to show black art in this way.
It's so important that we tell our stories. I want to go back to the example of the Griot and people who believe in this way. We're so honored to be here. And Joe Lewis, thank you, brother, you know,
absolutely,
for you, for this festival.
Here, here.
For being persistent and insistent that we be here with chapter and verse. We need to see ourselves on screen and tell our stories. And a lot of times we'll see something that's a black film. I'm reading a script now for a friend, you know, Antoine Fuqua. Let's give Antoine a round of applause. From Pittsburgh, right from
Pennsylvania,
here,
Point Breeze.
Who believes in it. But sometimes Antoine will give me a script to read that's about the black experience. And, you know, I teach film at Columbia University, and specifically I teach screenwriting. I'm also in the directing advisory, so I direct advisors. And Antoine would give me a script, and he said, what's your impression? And it's a black script, and I says, a white dude wrote this, right? And he goes, yeah, brother, this is the problem. So I think we should know how important our stories were and how important those little victories that we have, You know, Miss Maddy's superpower was that she loved her grandson and loved everybody around her to her last breath. Lance's superpower was that he was able to walk down the street and see all of the traps and see all sides of Harlem and be willing, this is important, and be willing to give up his second chance so that young brother can have a first chance.
Wow.
And I think that we should understand that we are superheroes.
Yeah.
And we can tell those stories. And our superheroes don't have to fly, don't have to have X-ray vision. They just need to be who we are and need to understand, as we tried to say in this film, how to, when you're oppressed, the oppressor tries to break you, but when you're a broken people, how do broken people love each other? We do it one moment at a time in pieces, back to wholeness despite of what anybody says or does.
I love it. And love is a great superpower. Mr. Chris Moore.
Mr. Joseph, I saw you in the PBS film about the Panthers in the 21. That was a powerful piece, too. This is about the most powerful movie I have ever seen. It strikes on a number of levels, and you got the baby birth, the movie, but distribution is always the problem. Is anyone picking up on this and realizing how much people want to see something like, how hungry we are for something like this that speaks to us on so many levels? Where's the distribution? Where can you get it seen? I know you have film festivals, but where else can you get it seen? Can you get a deal on TV, the movies? Where's Hollywood in all this? And why aren't you at the multiplex? And I'm not talking about you, it's your fault, but why these white distributors don't pick up on this kind of stuff, because this is much better than some cat going bam, 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 and shooting.
Oh, thank you so much for that, brother. Thank you. Thank you.
That was a great question.
So it's every step of the way it was a struggle to make this film because, you know, when we went to a couple of the studios in the beginning, they didn't get the storytelling. my brother, for exactly what you said, because something didn't blow up in the first 5 minutes, or because it wasn't a big laugh out loud
No
joke.
cultural
So we
identification.
raised the money independently. Festivals have been great, and especially our festivals, Urban World and Pan-African Film Festival. We're in limited distribution right now. We hope the fact that we've gotten universally great reviews. We were New York Times Critics Pick. The LA Times said that the spirit of Baldwin is alive in this film. Variety, Hollywood Reporter. But one review said, this is the kind of film Hollywood should be making, but unfortunately doesn't, and this is the kind of film that not enough people will see. But we want to say that, for right now, we had a limited run in LA and Chicago. We're getting ready to expand again. We're in one theater in Harlem, so everybody's got relatives in New York, get them to come out to a place called Mist Harlem, M-I-S-T. And then we do have a deal with BET, so we'll be on BET in a few months. They've become a partner and really believes. But it's so important when we struggle to get films like this made that we come out and support it. And that we come back and that we bring friends, that we bring, in New York City, we've had folks bring out their classes from school. We've had high school classes. We'd have seniors come out in groups. We've had people, one of my students went and said, I sat next to a guy who this was his third time seeing the film. So please use your social media, your Instagram, your Twitter to talk about the film. We're going to keep pushing. We're determined to kind of, keep the independent distribution going, not just for the sake of this film, but to kind of create a buzz to let them know that when an independent film happens, that we want to see it, we want to support it, and we want other filmmakers that are coming up to tell our stories in a way that we recognize ourselves on screen.
Fantastic. Thank you for that. TJ?
Great job, first of all. Multi-layered question. You got a wonderful script. As a filmmaker myself, aspiring, whatever, raising the money. My goodness, that's probably been the hardest thing for me in trying to do it. And then approaching the actors, because, Loretta, she's probably one of my favorite actors of all time just because I love her spirit, but how do you approach them before you get the money? Because these are things that I'm going through even right now. Do you get the money, then approach them? Just kind of, if you can, school me on that.
Yeah, it's, there's no one way to do it, but I will say, so sometimes as you have the money, it makes it a little bit easier. I do say make that script as tight as possible. Right. When we were filming one night, in fact, we were up late. We did an all-night shoot where we were filming Miss Maddy's death scene. And I was sitting with Loretta, and I said, you're so busy. Why did you, what made you take the film? And I had a good casting director, a woman named Fern Castle, who had relationships, and she would get the script to people and said, just read the script. And she said, it was the script, Jamal. There wasn't a false word on the page. And so that's what happened with all of the actors. So part of it, a large part of it was that people responded to the script. Some of it had to do with the fact that combined, that Daniel and I had a bit of a reputation in terms of the work. Daniel has done these one-man shows. Paul Robeson, another show called Through the Night. If you've seen him on stage, he's magnificent. He can portray, in the course of 90 minutes, 25 different characters, young, old, men, women. He's just a powerful stage actor. This was his film debut. And I had some awareness and reputation for my work as a film educator and as a filmmaker. So it's kind of those combination of things that get people to read. And then from there was a real conversation with them about what we thought the story was about. All of them were committed to what we were trying to do. All of the actors had someone, if not a family member, somebody close to them who had been to prison, who was in prison. And they understood that if we did our job, people would look at reentry, incarceration a little bit differently. So, so it's a combination of those things, and I think you have to approach it as a filmmaker on all fronts at once. Sometimes you get an actor attached, and that helps you get some other folk. Sometimes it's the script, and you get a good producer attached that can help you raise some money, and you can say, I have this much to keep going. But make sure that script is tight. And then if you need to, shoot a little bit of the film, shoot a little bit, just a scene or so somebody can see what you're doing, or if you can't shoot the film, you can do a little bit of a lookbook. And sometimes it's a digital lookbook with photos and just a little bit to say, this is the spirit up, so people can get the vibe of the story you want to tell.
Thank you.
Fantastic, right over here.
Hey, Brother Jamal. Second time seeing it, loving it even more. I'm just seeing more stuff in it than the first time, and it just resonates for me. You know, with the Antoine Fuqua connection, it's not, I don't think it's unfair to compare this to the Equalizer in some ways, in terms of like superhero protagonist saving someone and all that kind of stuff. I mean, the use of the community in this film, you know, it just has an energy to it where it's like, well, you know, it's like, you have to do this outside the system, but can you talk about the differences between trying to tell a story about black protagonists in a mainstream environment and then having the ability to control the story from your
Absolutely, Brother Mike. What was the first part, the difference between which? What's the first part?
Well, I'm just saying, there's similarities between what Antoine Fuqua was able to do with Equalizer.
Yeah, absolutely.
And this one. But this one, utilizing the community.
And I'm honored to be, that's one of my favorite, that's probably my next favorite Fuqua film next to Training Day. And I knew the script because as Antoine was doing, he shared the script with me, and we were almost kind of shooting at the same time. And what I think is so brilliant about The Equalizer is that it really is character-driven. It's a character portrait. And they knew, they being Brother Denzel Washington and Antoine, trust each other as a filmmaker team, and they trust that that could be a real character story. Remember, The Equalizer, the first time that we realized that he's got this, as they say, a unique set of skills, is about 20 minutes into the film. What we know about him in the beginning is that he's a grieving man, and that he's a lonely man, and ostensibly a good man, right? And so it's that same journey that we wanted to do, and I think our access to Denzel's character in The Equalizer is similar to the access that we wanted to give to Lance, that as he started to make certain decisions, you were not watching the character from outside, but from inside, really feeling that kind of journey, So yeah, thanks for that comparison.
But yeah, I mean, but in terms of like, I look at this film, it's like, well, I just think, I'm just happy that it got made because it speaks to me more than when you approach a similar sort of genre film from a mainstream perspective. So, and then what you've been able to do at Mist, I mean, that made like national news in terms of the box office turnout. At Mist. So the importance of making your own within your community, utilizing the resources of your community to tell a story versus...
Yeah, no, absolutely, yeah. So I understand what you're saying. Yeah, we did, and that's why we subtitled it A Harlem Story. We knew that we wanted the community to be a character in the film and again, referring to those workout crews that really exist, the bartenders and Mind Up and those particular crews. Even the little thing that people recognize when you go into those hole-in-the-wall restaurants where Chinese folks are serving soul food. And the church life. Pastor Mike is my pastor, of First Corinthian Baptist Church. And that's how he kind of talks. He talks about affirmation and service and, activism. And having those resources, having folks open their homes, having locations available to us, stores and vendors, having the cooperation of the community instead of folks, walking through the shots, being there, helping you kind of create the stories. We couldn't have made that film without the embrace of the community. And just really talented young people that work beyond the call of duty. Our art department was just fantastic. Miss Maddy's apartment actually was decorated. It was an empty apartment that we got. Everything in the art department created. But they took the time to really visit those kind of homes so that it felt like grandma's home. You know what I mean? So yeah, all of that was important, and I think it was grassroots in that way. And I think as independent filmmakers, you have to see the lack of money not as an obstacle, but as an opportunity to really tell some storytelling. And to that end, even when we were talking about the production design of the film, we decided to frame it and shoot it documentary style. Right? we had a good camera, we had the Alexa, we had that, and we could have prettied it up and just shot it that way. We said, no, we want people to forget that they're watching a film and actually think, I had a chance to spend 6 months with this guy from the time he came out of prison until the time that he decided to, you know, sacrifice himself and take care of business and go back to prison to save this young boy.
All right. Was there a question here? Quickly, we're getting the cue here. We'll take one quick question, quick answer, quick question,
Yes.
quick answer.
Yes.
I'm curious about your history with Daniel Beatty, and I got to see him in Through the Night. He's an amazing actor, and I'm wondering how you guys met and how you came to do this project together, and then how I noticed that he was also one of the screenwriters, and I'm curious about how the screenplay got written.
So Daniel and I know each other from Harlem and from the theater community, and I worked with Daniel on a couple of his productions, helped compose some stuff for a musical, and was a producer on a couple of his things. And we knew we wanted to make a film together and tell something that we felt that we were kind of uniquely qualified to tell as black men in Harlem. And so we sat, we watched some films. We watched a lot of foreign films that were portraits and character studies. Films like Sotsi, the South African film, The Lives of Others, which is an East German film, Beautiful, Javier Bardem, where filmmakers really took their time in letting you be invested into the character. And then start a process of kind of beating the story out together. And then, I kind of took over from there in terms of, coming out some drafts. Daniel would edit, we went back and forth. And it took us about 4 months of writing to get a script that we thought was tight.
Thank you.
That was the process.
Yeah.
And sorry, we got the cue. We have to cut.
Just one more. I promise I'll make it a
Okay.
30-second
All right.
answer.
Okay.
All right. Anytime you can get Steve Cannon in a film, appreciate that. Brother played the blind man. But any advice that you can give, for future filmmakers? What do you see for, this current environment and what they can do?
Well, I heard Joe announce that tomorrow there's going to be acting workshops and screenwriting workshops. I'm a product of those kinds of workshops coming out. I'm a full professor at Columbia and been teaching at Columbia. But I learned my craft when I came out because there were workshops to go to, like the Frederick Douglass Writing Academy. I took advantage of all of that. I did on film, even though I was holding down a full-time job, whenever I could come, first started volunteering on a film, worked myself up from learning how to be a PA. My first job was, I was the guy watching parking spots and didn't even see the filming. And I worked my way up to be an assistant director so I could really learn the craft. Learning the craft and understanding that there's so many things to do on film, and if you can get it as a job, that's fine. Shadow someone and learn, because even as you're shadowing, if you do a good job, you start to make the connections. Film is a collective art, and so it takes a lot of people to make a film, and so along the way, you're making those connections and you're learning your craft, and never give up. 2 quick things I'd like to say. One, for everybody in the audience, there's no start date on activism, and there's no expiration date on your dreams. So, please keep that in mind. And the other thing I'd like to end with is that one of the festivals was the Human Rights Watch Festival, and we were blessed to be there as a narrative film talking about that. And you might say, well, what's the human right we're talking about? The human right is simply this: when you look at brothers and sisters who are coming out of prison, re-entering, what we're saying, the human right here is, and this applies to people dealing with illness, with mental health, with poverty, coming out of prison, that brothers and sisters, the right of an individual to recapture their life and have a second chance is more than a moral obligation. It is a human right.
Mr. Jamal Joseph, thank you so much, brother. Congratulations and much success to you.
Thank you.
Definitely. All right.
Let's hear it again for Jamal Josephs and Brian Cook. Don't forget, tomorrow we start at 11. We have films all day. We have a celebration of the great director, trailblazer Michael Schultz.